Hey guys, tonight we slip into the warm, dusty air of ancient Rome, sometime around the middle of the 1st century CE. You're blinking awake in the dim half-light, your face itchy from the straw mattress, and the first thing you hear is the creak of someone else's footsteps on the floor above. Outside your window, really more of a gap in the wall covered by a tattered cloth. The Subura is already alive. Men are shouting prices for bread, a donkey brays somewhere in the alley, and the sweet sour smell of last night's spilled wine mixes with something that might be yesterday's fish. You probably won't survive this, by the way. If the bad food doesn't get you, the bad company might. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyes adjust slowly, tracing the uneven plaster walls streaked with soot. This is not luxury living, just one of dozens of rented cubicles crammed into an insula, a multi-story block where you and a dozen other women rent from a landlord who mostly pretends you don't exist. The straw mattress beneath you is lumpy and smells faintly of oil from someone's hair. There's a chipped pottery jug at your feet. It's yesterday's drinking water, now slightly cloudy. The morning starts early here not because you're eager, but because the city doesn't wait for you. By sunrise, the Subura hums with life. Bakers hauling baskets of bread, laundry women pounding clothes in soapy basins, the occasional senator in a litter trying to look like he's not passing through the wrong part of town. Somewhere nearby, a cockerel crows like it's auditioning for the emperor's personal farm. You stretch, careful not to bump the low rafters. The room is tiny, no larger than a modern walk-in closet, and the only furniture is a wooden stool and a small chest for your few belongings. A couple of tunics, a jar of rouge, and a comb missing 2 teeth. Historians still argue whether most Roman prostitutes own much beyond the basics. But here, the lack of clutter is less about minimalism and more about the fact that there's nowhere to put anything. From downstairs drifts the muffled thump of someone kneading dough, probably the bakery below. The smell is torture. You make a mental note to snag a loaf later, maybe trading a smile or a bit of gossip for a discount. Breakfast is a formal affair here. It's whatever you can grab. Maybe bread and olives if you're lucky. Before you even step outside, there's work to do. Splashing your face with the cold water in your jug, rubbing away the night's dust with a scrap of linen, and checking your hair in a bronze mirror whose surface warps your reflection just enough to make you suspicious of your own nose. In the corner, you keep a pouch with small coins, payment from the last few nights. A denarius here, a few sesterces there, never enough to relax. Leaning out of your doorway, you watch the street. It's narrow, shadowed, and already clogged with bodies. The Subura is famous for its chaos. Rich Romans pass through only when they have to, unless they're here for the sort of company you offer. And even then, they keep their hoods low. You spot a fellow tenant downstairs, a woman named Livia, shaking out her skirt and muttering to herself. She worked late last night, and the faint smell of incense still clings to her. One quirky detail, the poets never forget to mention. Some women in your trade start the day with a quick offering at a roadside shrine. A pinch of incense, a whispered prayer to Venus, maybe even a tiny garland of flowers if they can spare it. It's not about morality. No one pretends this job is sacred. It's about survival, appealing to any deity who might nudge luck in your favor. You shuffle down the stairs, sidestepping a boy carrying amphory of cheap wine. The street hits you like a wall of noise and smell. There's the briny sting of fishmongers unpacking their catch, the musky odor of sheep pen near the market, the sweet tang of figs being sliced for sale. Somewhere a fight breaks out. 2 men, probably drunk from last night, shoving each other until a bystander steps in. Already you're scanning faces. Even at this hour, there are men who didn't quite make it home last night, still weaving through the streets. Some are good for business. Some are trouble wrapped in a toga. You've learned to tell the difference. Mostly, there's a rhythm to mornings here. You check in with your acquaintances. A baker who sometimes sends day-old bread your way. A washerwoman who trades news for a coin. The doorman at a nearby tavern who knows which patrons pay without fuss. Networking, though it's not called that yet. starts before breakfast. As you walk, your sandals scuff over uneven stones. You pass graffiti scratched into the walls, love notes, crude drawings, political slogans. One says Felix ik Fut. Felix was here. You smirk. Someone always is. By the time the sun clears the rooftops, you've already taken the day's mood. Some mornings feel like trouble from the first step. Others carry a strange lightness. Today is somewhere in between. You head toward a public fountain, both for water and for a few minutes of conversation. The fountain is a hub, a place where everyone stops, so you keep your ears open. You catch a snippet about a visiting senator's party tonight, an opportunity, if you can find a way in. You linger just long enough to wet your hands, smoothing back your hair. A vendor nearby offers dates, the sticky kind that cling to your fingers. You buy two, savoring the sweetness as the city's heartbeat picks up pace. The Suburra doesn't care if you're ready. It's moving and you're swept along with it. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you're already calculating. Who might pass through today? What events are happening? Whether the afternoon will be spent in a smoky tavern or a cramped upstairs room. The day is young, but in your line of work, the clock runs faster than you'd like. You start back toward your room, the noise of the fountain fading behind you, and your mind turns to the question every working woman here faces before midday. What will you wear? Dressing is more than a matter of modesty or fashion. It's strategy. You can't stroll the Suburra in a senator's daughter's gown without raising eyebrows. But you also can't pull in the better-paying clients if you look like you've just crawled out from under the amphora racks. You lift the lid of your chest and pull out your options. There's a thin saffron-dyed stola, technically a color reserved for brides, but in your trade is a deliberate signal. It tells passers-by exactly what you are without you having to say a word. Then there's a darker, cheaper tunic, good for days when you expect to linger in taverns or sit in smoky corners. Historians still argue whether these uniforms were legally enforced or just common practice. But either way, the color does half your advertising before you open your mouth. You settle on the saffron today, partly for luck, partly because the hem is mended enough to pass for respectable. Over it, you drape a light shawl, dyed a deep red that sets off your hair. The fabric isn't expensive, but the color suggests it might be. Presentation matters. If you can look like a client's fantasy for even 10 seconds, you're already halfway to a deal. On the stool, your small collection of cosmetics awaits. A jar of white lead powder. Dangerous, yes, but no one told the fashion gods. And a tiny dish of cinnabar for your lips. The lead lightens your skin, making you stand out in the dim interior of a painter, and the cinnabar catches the eye. You smear a touch of olive oil on your arms and collarbone for that sheen of health. Though you know it'll collect dust within an hour. The bronze mirror wobbles your reflection, but you're used to it. You tilt your head, checking how the shawl drapes. A crooked pin can change the whole effect. Somewhere in the background, a neighbor is humming an off-key tune, punctuated by the thud of a broom hitting the floor. The building's alive with its own rhythm. Once dressed, you make a slow lap through your part of the district. You pause at doorways where merchants lean out to greet the morning crowd, your shawl slipping just enough to show the curve of your shoulder. This isn't desperation, it's marketing. You offer a friendly word to the fruit seller who once tipped you off about a visiting gladiator looking for company. You hold the gaze of a young man sweeping the steps of the bathhouse, his blush almost as satisfying as a coin in hand. One quirky tidbit. Some Roman women carried small scent pouches hidden in their clothes, not just for fragrance, but to mask the smell of certain oils or ointments they'd used earlier. You got one today, cloves and myrtle, tucked just under your neckline. A passing breeze sends a scent up toward your face, and you can almost imagine yourself in the gardens on the Esquiline Hill, far from the noise of Suburra. But you can't daydream for long, as you pass a shaded colonnade. Two matrons glance your way, their lips tightening into disapproval. You know the look. They see the saffron, the shawl, the powder, and they make their judgment in an instant. You're used to it. Rome is a city of contradictions. It thrives on what it pretends to despise. Those same matrons will be shocked to learn how many respectable men have climbed the stairs of the Suburra's lupanars after dark. Your feet carry you toward a small public bath you sometimes frequent, not to bathe, but to loiter. The steam curling from the doorway gives your skin a glow, and the men coming out are usually warm, relaxed, and more inclined to conversation. You don't push yourself on anyone. You make yourself part of the scenery, the way a tavern's barmaid does. Let them approach. It's here that you catch sight of a familiar figure, Marcus, a wine merchant with fondness for saffron stolas and long conversations. You exchange a few pleasantries, slipping in a joke about how his amphory always seem heavier in the mornings. He laughs, and his eyes linger a beat too long. You don't press him. You just make sure he sees the red of your shawl as you turn away. Plant the seed, let it grow. Back in the street, the sunlight has shifted, casting sharper shadows. You pass another woman in trade, her hair braided with tiny bronze beads that catch the light. You nod at each other, colleagues, not competitors. In a city this size, there's enough business to go around, and the worst thing you can do is make an enemy. You stop briefly at a tavern doorway to adjust your shawl, catching a glimpse of your reflection in the polished bronze of a water jug. Not bad. You look like someone with a plan, even if the plan is mostly survive until sundown. By the time you're back near your own building, you've collected more than stares. You've gathered a mental map of the day's possibilities. The merchant who might return this evening, the matron whose husband has that distracted, restless look, the rumor of a party that could turn into gold if you can find the right introduction. Dressing isn't just about clothes. It's about stepping into a role, one that might earn you a good meal tonight and a few coins for tomorrow. The street is fully awake now, the soundscape shifting from morning chores to business chatter. This is when you turn errands into opportunity. No one calls it marketing yet, but that's exactly what it is. You slip your pouch of coins under your shawl, give the hem of your stole one last tug, and head toward the market square. The stalls are a blur of color and noise, baskets pile high with figs, honeycombs glistening in the sun, bolts of dye wool fluttering in the breeze. You're not here just to shop. You're here to be seen. A smile at the right butcher might earn you a tip about a wealthy patron throwing a feast. A kind word to the olive seller could mean an introduction to his cousin's friend who just came into some money. First stop, the baker's stall. You greet him with a mock scold for not saving you the biggest loaf. He pretends a protest, then reluctantly hands over a smaller one. On the house. You thank him with a warm laugh and a promise to send good luck his way. The bread is fresh and fragrant. You tear off a corner, its steam curling into the cool morning air. Historians still argue whether prostitutes in Rome were banned from certain public markets, but here in the Suburra, nobody enforces such rules. If you've got coins, you've got a place. And sometimes, if you've got charm, you don't even need the coins. The taverns near the marketplace are already open, their doorways dark and inviting. You slip into one for a moment, not to drink, but to chat with the owner. He's an old Greek who knows everyone worth knowing in this quarter. You ask casually about last night's crowd, and he tells you a senator's son has been slumming it lately. Spent his father's money faster than he can earn it. You tuck the name away. Young men with something to prove are often generous. Outside, you make your way toward the bathhouse district. Bathhouses aren't just for bathing. They're social hubs where merchants, lawyers, and laborers alike come to relax. You don't go in today, but you linger just outside in the warm mist drifting through the open doorway. The scent of oil and steam clings to your shawl, making you seem fresher than the dust-covered women still hauling laundry or sweeping doorsteps. As you wait, a group of actors passes by, their tunics spattered with stage paint. Actors in Rome are like your own profession, admired in private, scorned in public. You've done favors for a few of them before, sometimes for coins, sometimes in exchange for news. Today, one of them leans in to tell you about a troupe performing near the Forum tomorrow. Good to know. Performances mean crowds, and crowds mean opportunity. You decide to wander toward the herb sellers. One woman here deals in more than spices. She has a sideline in charms and whispered remedies for everything from lovesickness to bad dreams. You buy a sprig of rosemary, partly for the scent, partly for the way it says, "I have a little extra to spend to anyone watching." The herb seller winks and slips you a pinch of dried mint for luck. One quirky tidbit about the marketplace, you notice it every time, is that vendors shout the prices as though the louder they yell, the better the olives will taste. It's like an ancient version of street advertising, all volume and bravado. You join the rhythm of it, calling back a teasing remark to a melon seller who's clearly had too much watered wine already. He roars with laughter, drawing glances from the crowd. More eyes on you, that's the goal. As midday heat builds, you take a shaded street toward a quieter square, where older men sit on stone benches, watching everything and pretending they're not. You slow your walk, letting your shawl slide just so, and one of them clears his throat, a signal you've seen before. You stop, exchange pleasantries, and agree to bump into him later at a wine shop he names. No promises, but a mental appointment added to your day's calendar. By the time you're heading home, you've accomplished more than it seems. Planted seed with merchants, picked up news about upcoming events, and positioned yourself in the minds of half a dozen potential clients. The errands, bread, herbs, gossip are just a cover. The real work is weaving yourself into the city's web so tightly that opportunity can't help but bump into you. You take the last turn toward your building. Sabura's narrow streets wrapping you again in their familiar smells and sounds. Somewhere above, a tenant pours out a basin of water, and you step aside just in time. Life here demands quick reflexes, in more ways than one. The sun is high now, pouring down into the alleys like liquid bronze. Heat presses against your saffron stola, and the dust sticks to your sandals. This is when you head toward the Lupaner, the heart of business, and the place where the city's most whispered about transactions take place. From the outside, the building doesn't look like much. 2 stories of weathered brick, a faded fresco above the door showing Venus with a teasing smile. But inside, the atmosphere changes. The air is heavy with a mixture of perfumes, lamp oil, and bodies. Voices rise and fall like waves, punctuated by bursts of laughter or the sharp clap of an argument being settled. You know your place here. You're not the only woman working these rooms, and the unspoken rules keep the peace. Never poach a client mid-negotiation, never undercut a colleague in earshot, and never, absolutely never, steal from another's purse. Break those, and you might as well walk out into the street, wearing a sign that says, "Free Trouble." Your first stop is a small back room where the owner, a shrewd woman named Demisha, sits at a low table counting coins. She's older, with the sharp gaze of someone who can calculate a man's willingness to spend before he's even opened his mouth. She nods at you, slips a few sesterces toward a ledger, and tells you the second room on the left is free when you need it. That's as close to warmth as she gets. Historians still argue whether Lupaners operated under strict licensing or more as tolerated gray zones, but in practice, here in the Sabura, the line between legal and illegal blurs like pain and rain. As long as Demisha keeps the local watch fed with small bribes, the door stays open. You move through the main hall slowly, letting your shawl trail just enough to draw eyes. Men sit at small wooden tables, drinking wine that's been watered down to keep them in the mood without tipping them into sleep. Some are loud, boasting about recent winnings at dice. Others sit quiet, nursing cups and watching the room. A new client, a man with a travel-stained cloak and the sunburn of someone from the provinces, catches your eye. You greet him with a gentle joke about the heat, and he laughs, a little too loudly. He admits he's new to the city. That's a cue you've learned well. Tourists in Rome are both curious and cautious, willing to pay for company but wary of being made fools. You suggest a drink first, guiding him to a corner table. The negotiations are never crass, not at first. You talk about where he's from, whether he's seen the Forum yet. The ridiculous price of figs this year. Only after the second cup does the conversation shift, your fingertips brushing the rim of his cup, your eyes holding his a moment too long. He names a price. You counter with one that's slightly higher. The dance continues until you both settle on a number. As you lead him toward the second room on the left, you pass another worker, a tall woman named Vibia, escorting her own client in the opposite direction. She flashes you a sly grin. You grin back, knowing the silent camaraderie in this business is sometimes the only safety net you have. The room itself is small but not unpleasant. A narrow bed with a clean linen sheet, a small oil lamp casting a golden glow, and a bowl of water in the corner. There's a faint smell of rosemary from whoever used it earlier. You keep the conversation light, even playful. In your line of work, ease is part of the service. It makes the client feel like he stumbled into a rare, unhurried corner of the city. When your time together ends, you escort him back to main hall, making sure to part on good terms. A happy customer can be worth more than the day's payment. They bring friends, or they come back themselves. You spend the next hour weaving between tables, sometimes sharing a joke, sometimes simply listening. One quirky detail about the Lupaner crowd: they're often less interested in privacy than you think. Some seem to enjoy the public aspect, as if being seen here adds a certain spice to their lives. A man might talk loudly about his farm, knowing full well his neighbor's cousin could overhear. By the time you step outside into the afternoon light, you've earned a decent handful of coins and a few mental notes for later. The provincial man may return before leaving Rome. The merchant in the corner mentioned a banquet, and Vibia hinted that a certain wealthy widow has been inquiring. Business doesn't end when you leave the Lupaner. It simply changes shape. The street greets you again with its chaotic music. Hawkers calling, sandals slapping stone, a distant burst of applause from somewhere near the forum. You tuck your coin safely away, the weight of quiet reassurance against your hip. For now, you've navigated the Lupaner without stepping on anyone's toes. And in this neighborhood, that's a victory in itself. You walk back toward your building with the lazy gait of someone who knows how to conserve energy in this heat. Afternoon in the Suburra is a strange in-between time. The city's rush is slowed, the streets are hazy with the smell of cooking oil and charcoal smoke, and there's a lull before the evening's chaos begins. For you, this is the window for downtime, if such a thing exists here. Your first stop is your own tiny room, where you drop the shawl onto the stool and loosen the Stola sash. The air is still warm inside, but the shade makes it bearable. You count the coins from the Lupaner on your bed, stacking them in neat little towers. It's a satisfying ritual, even if the towers are small. Historians still argue whether most Roman sex workers lived hand-to-mouth or were able to save substantial sums. But for you, today's take means you can buy decent bread, some olives, and maybe a sprig of basil to freshen up your next meal. From next door comes a rhythmic clatter of someone combing their hair. Livia again, humming the same off-key tune she was at sunrise. You call through the thin wall to ask if she's heard any news. She has a dice game at a wine shop later, with a few gamblers who might be willing to pay for more than just the thrill of losing money. You file that away. Evenings can go many directions, and it's good to have options. Before thinking too far ahead, you decide to eat. From under the bed, you pull a small basket with yesterday's bread and a lump of soft cheese. It's not much, but paired with a loaf from the baker this morning, it's almost a feast. You slice the bread with a small bronze knife, careful to save the crumbs for later. They can be soaked in watered wine for a late-night snack. A jug of water sits in the corner, still cool from the fountain trip earlier. After eating, you lie back for a short nap, one arm thrown over your eyes. In the lull, your mind drifts. You think about that traveling merchant, whether he'll seek you out again before leaving Rome, and about the rumor of the senator's son. There's a soft creak of footsteps in the hallway, and you half doze to the sound. When you wake, the light has shifted, the sharp shadows of midday softening to gold. This is when you take care of small side hustles, though you wouldn't call them that aloud. You keep a little tray of homemade rouge, scented with crushed roses, which you sell quietly to women in the neighborhood. There's also the occasional love charm, just a bit of knotted red thread and some whispered nonsense. That people swear will make a person notice them. It's harmless, and it earns you a few extra sesterces. One quirky detail of your trade. Gossip is a currency all its own. Sometimes the best thing you can trade isn't a service or a trinket. It's a story. You've heard which baker's wife has been visiting the baths more often than usual, which landlord is in debt to a moneylender, which soldier has been caught sneaking wine from his commander's stores. Share a choice piece of news with the right person, and you've bought yourself goodwill that could last weeks. Later, you step outside, taking a seat on the front step. The street is quieter now, the loudest sounds coming from a smithy a few doors down, where someone is hammering metal into shape. You watch a group of children chase each other through the alley, their sandals slapping the stones. For a moment, you allow yourself to simply observe. Then Livia appears in the doorway, leaning against a frame with a smirk. You come into the wine shop later? She asks. You nod. Even if the gamblers aren't in the mood to spend coins on company, there's always a chance to listen, to plant yourself in their memories for another day. As the air cools slightly, you retreat indoors again to freshen up, straightening your stola, dabbing on a little of the rose-scented rouge, tucking the scent pouch back into place. Downtime is never just rest. It's a slow burn preparation for what's coming next. By the time you're ready, the city is shifting gears. The smell of roasting meat drifts in from a nearby food stall, mixing with the sharp tang of wine. Somewhere, a flute is playing a wandering tune, and voices begin to rise in the streets. The sun is tilting toward the rooftops, and you can feel the night's momentum gathering like a wave about to crest. Your brief hours of rest are over. Rome is calling again. By the time you step back into the street, the light has turned molten, pooling gold across the uneven stones. The Suburra hums differently now. Less the busy clattered chores, more the restless shuffle of people looking for amusement. This is the hour when you think beyond the district's walls, toward where the crowds are thickest and the coins are loosest. Tonight, there's a murmur in the air about a chariot race at the Circus Maximus. You can feel it in the faces of the passers-by. Men in their cleanest tunics, women arm in arm with friends, all headed in the same direction. The circus is a feast of opportunity. Crowds mean drink, and drink means lowered caution. And unlike in a lupanar, there's no door fee. Your entry is as simple as blending into the sea of spectators. You make your way down the sloping streets, following the current of people. As you near the massive oval arena, the noise swells. Vendors shout about honeyed almonds, roasted chickpeas, spice wine. The air smells of sweat, dust, and the sharp tang of horse manure. Even before the race begins, the atmosphere thrums like a drum. Historians still argue whether prostitutes at public games operated openly or more in the shadows, but here, in the swell of humanity, it's easy to see how visible you can be without anyone naming it aloud. You're just another face in the crowd, until you aren't. You choose a position halfway along the track, where men with full wine jugs will eventually drift. A group of them is already jostling for space, wagering on which faction, red, blue, green, or white, will take the day. You strike up conversation with one, teasing him about his choice. He laughs and offers you a sip of wine. You accept, letting the warm sweetness linger on your tongue. When the gates burst open and the chariots lunge forward, the crowd roars so loud it rattles in your chest. You watch, not just a race, but the men watching it. Their eyes darting from the track to you, their hands tightening on their cups. The man beside you shouts himself hoarse, and when his team loses, you lay a hand lightly on his arm in mock sympathy. The touch is enough to plant the thought that he might want to continue this evening elsewhere. Between races, you drift through the aisles, weaving between sellers with trays of food. You catch sight of Vibia across the way, leaning in close to a man whose toga is just slightly too fine for this part of the stands. She raises an eyebrow at you in greeting, before returning to her conversation. One quirky detail about these games: the loudest shouts aren't always for the winning team. Sometimes a spectacular crash will draw more applause than the victory lap. You notice a wreck in the third lap sends half the men in your section leaping to their feet, spilling wine and coins alike. You help one man retrieve his dropped sesterces, earning yourself an exaggerated bow of thanks. When the final race ends and the crowd begins to spill into the streets, you shift your focus. The exits are bottlenecks, perfect for chance meetings. You fall into step beside the man whose arm you touched earlier, letting the conversation meander toward a tavern he likes nearby. But the circus isn't the only fertile ground tonight. You've heard from Livia about the baths being unusually busy, thanks to visitors in town for the games. Baths, unlike the races, offer quieter corners, places where you can talk without shouting over 10,000 voices. You make a mental note. If the tavern doesn't pan out, the baths will be your next stop. You reach the tavern with your new companion, the smell of spiced lamb and warm bread spilling into the street. Inside, the noise is still lively, but it's a different energy, smaller groups, the clink of cups, the murmur of private wagers at the back tables. The owner recognizes you and gives a small nod, the kind that says you're welcome here as long as you don't cause trouble. You sit with the man for a drink, keeping the mood light, Sometimes the opportunity is in the moment. Sometimes it's in the memory you leave behind. Either way, you play the long game. When you step outside again, the streets are darker now, lit by oil lamps that sway in the evening breeze. The smell of the circus still clings to you, a mix of dust, horses, and excitement, and you know the night is far from over. Crowds are dispersing into taverns, bathhouses, and shadow corners, each one a chance waiting to be taken. The streets at night have a different pulse. The sun's heat has bled away, leaving the air cooler, but the cobblestones still hold a faint warmth under your sandals. You walk past shuttered market stalls and laundry lines swaying above your head, headed toward one of the big public bathhouses. From the outside, the building glows like a beacon, light spilling from the open doors. You can hear laughter, splashing water, and the rhythmic slap of wet sandals on stone. The baths are one of Rome's great equalizers. Senators and shopkeepers might soak in the same pool, separated only by a polite glance and a little luck. Inside, the first room you enter smells faintly of oil and herbs. Men are stretched out on benches, chatting while attendants scrape sweat and dirt from their skin with curved strigils. You pass through without hurrying. The goal isn't to be noticed too quickly. Historians still argue whether prostitutes working the baths had to be discreet or if their presence was an open secret. Tonight, you lean toward the open secret theory. You're not alone. 3 other women you know are here, lingering in the tepidarium, where the warm water invites long, unhurried conversations. You step into the steam-heavy air of the caldarium, where the heat is almost oppressive, like wrapping yourself in a damp blanket. The marble walls gleam with condensation, and you can barely see the other side of the pool. A few men glance your way before sinking deeper into the water. You choose a spot where the steam curls around your shoulders, making your skin shine. One man in the pool strikes up a conversation about the chariot races. You laugh and say you didn't bet this time. Last time you did, you lost enough to make you stick to selling company instead of wagering on horses. That earns you a grin. A quirky detail about the baths. Some people come less for the bathing and more for massage oils afterward. You watch an attendant work bergamot-scented oil into a customer's shoulders, the client's eyes half closed in bliss. It's a reminder that pleasure here isn't always about the obvious kind. Eventually, you make your way to the frigidarium, the cold water pool. The shock of the temperature is like stepping into reality after the blur of heat and steam. This is where some men linger less, shivering, eager to get dressed again. You, however, move slowly, letting them notice you while you float lazily on your back, hair fanning out in the water. When your companion from the caldarium finally emerges and heads toward the changing area, you follow at a comfortable distance. The apoditerium, the dressing room, is a place of transactions as much as clothing changes. You catch his eye as he fastens his belt, and his answering smile says the evening might not end here. But you're not finished with the baths yet. The outer courtyard is lively with people eating, drinking, and catching up on gossip. A small dice game is in progress near one of the columns. You slip into the circle just to watch, teasing the players about their luck. One accuses you, half joking, of distracting him into losing. You give him an innocent look, which makes the others laugh. Leaving the baths, you can feel the dampness still clinging to your skin under your tunic. The cool night air makes you shiver, but in a pleasant way. The streets are darker now, with most people indoors, but the taverns remain busy, spilling pockets of light and noise into the alleyways. On the walk back toward the Subura, you pass a small shrine with a flickering oil lamp. You pause to drop a token into the offering box, a habit not all in your trade keep, but you found the gods tend to smile more on the careful. Whether that's superstition or just a reflection of your own caution, you're not sure. You spot a familiar figure leaning against a wall ahead. It's Felix, one of the bath attendants who sometimes tips you off about wealthy newcomers. He tilts his head toward a side street and murmurs about a group of merchants staying at a nearby insula for a few nights. The kind who've been drinking, he says, and might want a guide to the more interesting parts of the city. You thank him and head that way, the evening stretching ahead of you like an open road. Every doorway, every corner, feels like it could turn into a story before the night ends. The side street Felix pointed out is quieter, but you can hear the muffled roar of laughter and music before you even see the tavern. It's one of those places that doesn't have a sign, just a painted amphora over the door, its edges worn down by years of rain and sun. The smell of roasted meat drifts out into the alley, carried on waves of wine-sweet breath from patrons leaning in the doorway. You step inside, eyes adjusting to the flickering lamplight. The walls are plastered in deep red, chipped in places, and painted with crude but cheerful scenes of satyrs and nymphs dancing. The floor is sticky underfoot. In the corner, a musician plucks a cithara, not because anyone's listening intently, but because the soft background melody makes the wine taste a little better. Your target for the night sits at a long table, a cluster of merchants from the provinces, their tunics dusty from travel. The table is already littered with half-empty amphorae. You can tell by their flushed cheeks and loud voices that they've had just enough to be generous, but not so much that they're about to pass out. Historians still argue whether women in your trade sought out such groups for better pay or avoided them for being too unpredictable. Tonight, you're leaning toward the opportunity side of the debate. A group means options, and options mean control. You approach casually, as if you're just passing through. One of them notices you first, and you catch his eye with a half-smile. That's all it takes. He nudges a man beside him, and suddenly you're being invited to join them. You slide onto the bench, close enough to be part of the warmth without crowding. The conversation flows like the wine. You ask them about their journey, nodding at their complaints about poor roads and bandits. You throw in a joke about how you once saw a donkey outpace a senator's carriage. True story, though you exaggerate the senator's outrage for effect. Laughter loosens pockets as surely as it loosens tongues. One of the merchants offers you a skewer of grilled lamb, still sizzling. You accept, biting into the smoky, tender meat, letting the juice run down your fingers before licking away with slow deliberation. It's a small thing, but in a room like this, small things can turn into invitations. You learn a quirky detail about one of the men. He claims he can tell the quality of olive oil just by smelling it and insists on proving it. Someone fetches a small amphora from behind the counter, and he sniffs it like it's a fine perfume, declaring it passable. Whether he's right or not, the table erupts in applause. The tavern owner, a sharp-eyed woman who's seen every kind of deal pass through her doorway, keeps glancing over. She knows what's going on, but as long as the wine keeps flowing, she won't interfere. She even sends over a plate of honey cakes, a subtle nod of approval, or perhaps an investment in keeping the merchants happy. As the night deepens, a few of the men peel away to the back room to play dice. You follow, drawn by the rattle of bone cubes in a cup. The air in here is heavier, thick with the scent of sweat and spilt wine. You lean over one player's shoulder, murmuring something encouraging just before he rolls. And when he wins, he grins at you like you had something to do with it. Eventually, one of the merchants, the one who offered the lamb, suggests fresh air. Outside, the night has gone cooler still, and the sounds of the city have softened into a low hum. He talked about his hometown, a coastal city where the streets smell of salt and fish, and how he hasn't seen it in years. You listen, head tilted just enough to make him feel like his story matters. The walk back toward his lodgings is slow. You pause at a fountain, the water rippling silver under the moonlight. He asks if you've ever thought about leaving Rome, about starting over somewhere quiet. You give a diplomatic answer. Something about how the city's chaos feels like home now. By the time you reach the insula where he's staying, his hand is at the small of your back. The deal is wordless, but as clear as the stars overhead. You glance up at the balconies above, laundry hanging limp in the night air, and think about how this is just another thread in the endless weave of your days. The morning after a night like that always starts the same, a slow, deliberate stretch, the kind that makes your spine crack softly in the still air. You rise before the rest of the building stirs, moving quietly so as not to wake anyone. Outside, the street is pale with dawn, the stones still damp from a night's dew. The air smells faintly of baking bread from a nearby shop, warm, yeasty, and promising. You head toward the public baths. Not because you're particularly grimy, though a layer of last night's tavern smoke still clings to your hair, but because the baths are a marketplace of whispers. Everyone comes here. Senators pretending they're just another citizen, merchants with more coin than sense, and fellow working women who know more about the pulse of the city than most politicians. The vestibule hums with voices. You hand over a small coin for entry and step inside, the warmth of the air enveloping you instantly. The scent of perfumed oils mixes with a sharper tang of clean stone and mineral water. You start in the tepidarium, easing yourself into the lukewarm pool, letting your muscles loosen. Conversations echo off the marble walls, bouncing in fragments. Tax hikes, grain shipments delayed, the latest scandal involving a certain general's wife. Historians still argue whether prostitutes use the baths as deliberate business venues or simply as places to socialize and stay informed. But the truth you know is that information is just as valuable as coin. A whispered tip about a newly arrived foreign trader or a noble's secret vice can make the difference between a dull week and a profitable one. In the caldarium, steam swirls around you like a soft fog. You spot a familiar face, Livia, a fellow worker who specializes in charming retired soldiers. She greets you with a knowing grin, sliding onto the bench beside you. Between the hiss of steam and the drip of water from the ceiling, she tells you about a visiting Egyptian envoy who's been seen dropping more sesterces than cents at the chariot races. You file the detail away. A quirky tidbit emerges from the conversation. Apparently, someone in the Sabura is trying to sell imported crocodile eggs as a cure for baldness. No one's sure they're real or just very large chicken eggs, but it's the kind of ridiculous rumor that makes you laugh into your towel. After the steam, you cool down in the frigidarium, dipping into the cold plunge that shocks every nerve awake. The water bites, but it's worth it. The clarity it brings is like wiping dust from a mirror. You leave the baths feeling sharper, skin tingling, hair smelling faintly of lavender oil. From there, you wander toward the forum, not to shop but to listen. You lean against a column in the shade, half hidden by a passing crowd, catching snippets of deals being struck and debts being negotiated. A pair of moneylenders argue over interest rates. A group of actors bicker about a script change. In Rome, the forum is a stage, and everyone's performing. As the sun climbs higher, you duck into a shaded portico to avoid the worst of the glare. A water seller passes, his bucket sloshing, offering cups for a single coin. You take one and sip slowly, letting the coolness cut through the lingering heat from the baths. A man approaches, not a stranger, but an occasional patron who prides himself on remembering names. He greets you warmly, slipping into easy conversation about the upcoming gladiator games. You nod, smiling at his enthusiasm, and agree to meet later in the week. Sometimes securing tomorrow's work is as simple as standing in the right place at the right time. By midday, you head back toward your lodging, weaving through the tangle of streets. A group of children chases each other past, their bare feet slapping the stones, their laughter rising above the clatter of carts. An old woman selling figs calls out her prices, her voice carrying over the din. The city feels alive in a way that's both exhausting and comforting. Back home, you set aside a portion of the morning's coin for rent, another for food, and tuck the rest into the small clay jar hidden under your bed. You've learned the hard way that a cushion of savings can mean the difference between riding out a bad month and begging for work. Before the day stretches too far, you recline on your cot, the sounds of the street filtering in to the open window, vendors, distant hammering from a construction site, the occasional bray of a donkey. The light flickers across the wall as a breeze moves the curtain, and you allow yourself a few quiet moments before evening starts calling again. Night always arrives in Rome like the slow drawing of a curtain. Shadows first pooling in the narrow streets, then stretching across the facades of tenements and taverns until the lamps are lit. You've had a few hours rest, but the day's quiet is about to give way to the real work. First, you prepare yourself with care. In this trade, presentation is both shield and weapon. You choose a dress of deep red wool, nothing too fine, but a color that catches a lamplight and draws the eye. Your hair, oiled and combed, is pulled up to frame your face, while a touch of cold darkens your lashes. The scent of myrrh lingers at your wrists. Downstairs, the streets have shifted from the bustle of commerce to the murmur of pleasure-seeking. Tavern doors swing open to bursts of laughter and lyre music. The air smells of spiced wine, roast meat, and wood smoke. You walk toward the brighter streets first, places where wealthier clients stroll before disappearing into more private spaces. One corner is already taken by a pair of younger girls, their giggles carrying over the clop of a passing mule. You give them a polite nod but don't linger. Competition is sharper under the lamplight. Instead, you take up your spot near a tavern known for drawing merchants off ships moored at the Tiber. From here, you can watch for both opportunity and trouble. A group of sailors staggers past, their tunics stained with wine. One of them makes a crude gesture, but you ignore him. No sense wasting time on those who won't pay or can't keep a civil tongue. A more promising figure appears moments later. A man in a clean tunic, his hair carefully trimmed, a gold ring glinting on his finger. He hesitates when he sees you, then approaches with a kind of half-smile that says he's interested but cautious. Your conversation is brief but practiced. A few words about the coolness of night, a joke about the tavern's watered wine, and then the quiet negotiation of terms. He agrees, coins exchange hands, and you lead him to a discreet room above the tavern. Work, after all, is work. Later, you return to the street and find the mood changed. A city patrol is making its way down the block, their torches flaring. You step back into the shadow of an archway. Your license is in order, but patrols can still mean trouble, especially if they're looking to make an example of someone. They pass without incident, the iron of their armor catching the light before they disappear around the corner. The night continues in cycles, moments of waiting, flashes of conversation, negotiations struck in the brief space between a lamp's glow and the dark beyond it. There are hazards, a drunk who refuses to pay, a brawl breaking out across the street, a sudden shout from an unseen alley. But you've learned to read the rhythms, to step back when the air feels charged, to move towards safety when voices rise. Hours later, the streets begin to empty. The lamps burn low, their oil spent, leaving only the faint glimmer of the moon on the cobblestones. You make your way home, the coins in your pouch a reassuring weight. In your room, you count them carefully by lamplight, setting aside the portion for rent, another for food, and hiding the rest away. You wash your face, the sentimer now faint under the sharper smell of lamp oil and dust. Outside, the city is quieter, though never silent. Somewhere, a cart rattles past, and in the distance, a dog barks. You lie back on your cot, listening to the low hum of Rome's restless night. Your body is tired, but your mind drifts to tomorrow, another day the same, yet never exactly the same. The work is unpredictable, the risks constant, but for now, you have coin in your jar, a roof over your head, and the knowledge that you survived another day in the Subura. The curtain closes, until the next morning.